Just a little bit of background on who we are. We are a group of 60 high school juniors called Generation of Promise, called The Vibes. And as you can see, our YouTube series is called The Vibe, just kind of taken from our name. We don't really remember what Vibe stands for. It's an acronym, but like we kind of decided it's like vibrant, intelligent, beautiful. Some other two words that we don't really know. We all kind of came to the consensus that mental health was something that's super important to us, and we just wanted to create a space in which we could share our knowledge, our stories, and create a community within social media, hoping to ignite a change through this.
Yeah. All right. So, Alec, I think we should kick this off as a fact and a stat really highlighting what this issue is and how it has affected teens. Do you have anything that could be useful?
Yeah, so we're targeting when the pandemic happened, how it affected all these teenagers. And for me personally, when the pandemic happened, I really thought nothing of it. I just thought I'm just staying at home, and I just saw the effects of it when I was staying at home. I just started slacking off. My whole demeanor changed of how I got up in the morning. Sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really get up, brush my teeth, put my clothes on and all that.
I feel that.
Yeah, me too.
So I just became like a couch slug, to be honest. So it just really changed me as a person, but you can just see the effects of it with my daily work I do now, and it's just really different from what I've been used to and how it just changed me. I'm not going to say it for the better or for the worse, but it just really changed me in an aspect that I really didn't know or really wouldn't know if it didn't happen. So yeah, that's just me personally.
I think also I know it's a lot of my friends and my circles there was really an increase in anxiety and a little bit of depression. And I remember reading, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, that it was up to 4 times as high in the previous year during 2020, and I really saw that in a lot of people that I was close with, and they really, people that you would not call anxious people, really just entirely different people. So.
For sure, no, I agree. And I think that's really interesting. Something we found while we were researching is that depression and anxiety doubled and even in some cases tripled during the pandemic among teens. And I also, saw that reflected in my friend groups and just with different people I've interacted with. And for me personally, I saw a spike in my anxiety that I had never seen before. And I don't really like to say oh, my anxiety, because I think there's also a stigma around saying that you have anxiety or depression, and if you're not clinically diagnosed.
Yeah, there's a lot of don't self-diagnose.
Yes,
that's really
for sure.
So then it creates a roadblock for people that are I'm having this problem. You feel you can't say it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I faced that until I got clinically diagnosed with anxiety and depression, that I felt I couldn't say I'm feeling this.
Yes.
But we should be able to.
No, exactly. Yeah, just that safe space. And I think also during the pandemic, with apps like TikTok and Instagram, especially with TikTok for me, right now I'm off all social media and it's amazing. It doesn't, no, it has not cured anything that's going on in my head, but it's definitely, I think, helps me realize that being on my phone all day isn't a solution to, helping my issues. But during the pandemic, I remember at the start I was obsessed with TikTok, and I was on my phone so much,
Me too.
constantly scrolling through the apps, and I kept seeing yes, people being relatable, being oh, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling this way, but then there was this weird thing where I felt people were sharing their stories, but then others would almost bag on them for it, not to use slang, but I just feel it was just this weird vibe, and then everyone kind of just got into this spiral because you're isolated. I don't know about you guys, but what was your experience? Kind of for me, March 13th was the date where it all started.
Yeah.
That Friday.
Yeah, that Friday that we went home and we're we're not going back.
Did you have spring break? Because that's when I started spring break, or was it just a Friday and then it
Yeah, it was
ended?
just a Friday.
Isn't that Friday we're not coming back, we don't know for how long. And then it was bad because I think the resources were not there to give the education. there is something I realized, despite I'm not a fan of school, I realized that it was a space like socially that I counted on for like my mental
sure.
like my mental health was like I counted on having that status quo. I get up in the morning, I go to school, I meet with my friends before class. I really counted on that. So when it wasn't there, and there wasn't even a semblance of even having no real format for education, like virtually, I think that really, it was just like a free for all,
Exactly. Yeah, for me, when it started, they gave us like a lot of work, and it just, for me, just built on like the pressures on like, if I do it, I don't really have to do it. And then I just saw the effects of it after the school year, where my grades just like kind of plummeted, and it just built up more anxiety for me. And then on the aspect of like social media, like Skylar mentioned, like I would see like TikToks on like what you should be doing and like how they're acting, and it just gave a cloud of what people should be doing and like how people should be acting. And for me, it just took like a toll, but I tried to get back to it in sophomore year since there was no like in person. It still like raid heavy on me, but it was on Zoom. Tried to get back to it for me, and it was like one of the solutions I found was that I just needed to like focus on like myself and how to build myself as a character, and just like building my personality and my confidence and like how I'm going to succeed in this sophomore year that I couldn't in the last of freshman year. So yeah, how about you, Alice?
I mean, I was like addicted to TikTok. Like I was obsessed. Couldn't put my phone down. It was bad. Like I didn't focus on any of my schoolwork. But school was like that. It was like my place. Like it was where I went to like be myself and then hang out with people. I'm an only child. I lived in a house with 3 adults. And like my grandma, my parents, and so like I didn't really have like young people to hang out with. I love my parents, but like you guys know, teenagers, that's not all we want to do. We don't want to just hang out with our parents. Like we love them, but like not that much. So it was really hard for me. Like the isolation was intense, and like even when things like lifted a little bit, and we could like it was the summer and we could like do things outside, my parents were not okay with that. So I was even like my friends would go out and do things outside, and they would get that little taste of like freedom and like social, and I didn't get that. So like it was really hard. I had a really hard time. Like I already had anxiety and depression before the pandemic, but I definitely felt it triple. Like it was hard. But I think for a while I thought TikTok was like saving me. I was like, yes, something to do, but like I think it really like pulled me down. Like I think it made it worse. And then sophomore year, I did some work, but I wasn't really paying attention.
I really don't. I never really thought about like how much impact it would have if you're like an only child, because I have 2 siblings, relatively within like a couple of years of my age, and so I feel like even though having siblings always mixed feelings about having siblings and stuff like that, but like when you're completely cut off from the rest of the world, that really is like who you hang out with, who you talk with. It becomes your only social life. But I never thought about if you're an only child, you really don't have that. And my parents were also like, summertime, people were getting sick left and right. My parents were like, no, that's not happening to you. So your siblings really do become your only social life.
For the siblings, for me, we're like all about like, we're not the same age, so it was kind of like different from going to high school. Now just seeing my siblings every day, and personally I don't want to do that. And so it was just like I wake up, go downstairs, and my siblings just there. It's like you don't want to be there, and it was just a heavy toll because I wouldn't go to school and see like the regular people I would be going to. And then the extracurricular activities, like Elise mentioned, I had to like give up on, like sports, for example.
That was really hard.
Yeah, exactly. Really hard.
My parents just said, no, you're not doing that since like people are getting sick.
Yeah, you lose the things you love, the things that like to you give your life like a meaning, like something to do.
I know it's really gonna hurt me, like emotionally like that, and like. But I actually am doing this partly out of my own will because, you know, it's actually for the best of those around me. So
No, yeah, like I was so conflicted all the time
yeah,
because you know it's the right thing to do
Exactly.
to like stay at home and not endanger yourself or others. But man, did I want to do stuff like I wanted to go to tennis practice. See, my sport was a bit different because my freshman year was when it started, so it was like you couldn't do anything because we didn't know anything.
yeah,
But my sophomore year, I was able to do my sport safely because it's not a contact sport.
Yeah.
It's outside. We're separated. Like
Yeah.
literally, like don't hit each other with the racket. Like that's the
yeah.
that's the
Like the
goal.
one rule.
Yeah. So it made it safer, but I definitely felt for other people who had like extracurriculars that required being in close proximity, and that
Yeah.
got taken away.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, for me, just on that isolation page, and I think for everyone, it's like kind of what Donovan was speaking to. You want to keep your family safe and you want to keep, you know, those around you safe. But then you see your friends doing things and you're like, oh my gosh, I really want to be there right now.
Yeah.
And for me personally, one of my sisters was pregnant during COVID,
Oh
so it
my
was,
gosh.
yeah, it was a whole thing. But we had to, like, I guess this was at the beginning of my sophomore year. So this is like, my school was lucky enough to kind of go back, no hybrid. We just went in person with masks, and we had like 2 separate cohorts. So sometimes I would not see my friends at all, like the whole year basically, actually.
Yeah.
Because they were in the separate cohort, and our classes were super long, and honestly school was easy comparatively. We
Yeah.
can talk about what this year has been like for you guys, but it's been definitely hard for me academically. But kind of on that point, just during sophomore year, I would like wear a mask all day, and then, you know, we're still wearing them. You guys didn't get to see, but like we came in the house and we've been wearing masks and everything. But I would go to school, I would wear a mask, and I would come home and I would also have to wear a mask because, you know, we didn't want to get the baby sick
Oh yeah.
once she came home. So it was just a little bit difficult, and I felt isolated from my parents because I couldn't really even talk to them. I couldn't hug them. There were points like I would say, okay, good night, and it's like, I can't hug you, you know, in my own house, and I couldn't hug my friends at school. They were super strict about it. Like, people would literally come up, like, okay, ready? I'm talking to Donovan at school, ready?
Yeah.
I'm talking about a terrible test I had. People would literally come up to us and be like, you can't stand that close. And we were wearing masks. It's not like we weren't. And it
That's
was
so
just,
true.
and I'm
It's
sure
so
you guys probably experienced similar things, but it was just like,
So true.
very depressing for me to experience that. Like going to my dad's house and then coming to my mom's, it was a little bit better because I didn't have to wear a mask and I could be with her. But like, I depended on that socialization with my parents because I couldn't get it in school anymore. So it's just like,
Yeah. Wow.
it's like the perfect storm, I think, for teenagers,
It really
you know?
was. Yeah.
Exactly. For like, it was a heavy toll on like traveling to visit family members too, because it was like scary to see like what you could bring in
For
with
sure.
visiting them. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
like that was a big impact on me.
Yeah, and my grandma had been living with us for a few years at that point. And actually, a few months into COVID, she died. And
Gosh, I'm
we
so
couldn't,
sorry.
because of the pandemic, we couldn't have a funeral.
Oh my god.
So and my uncle, he lives in California with his husband,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't fly in for the funeral. So we had him on FaceTime while she was being buried, and we just, like, that's all we got was her being buried. Like, no funeral. We couldn't hug each other. And so we were just staying 6 feet apart, like, mourning together. Like, that was the most we could do, was, like, my family and then my uncle's family who lives in this state, and then my uncle on FaceTime. So that was definitely really weird, and that was an experience a lot of people had because people were dying from COVID. My grandma didn't die from COVID, so we weren't, like, quarantined, but it was definitely a strange experience. And that, like, can fracture a family. Like,
Even just on a family note,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know, like, I had baby cousins, like, my uncle lives in he moved to California from Michigan some years ago. They were born, I haven't seen them at all. It was my first cousins. It's kind of weird. I'm like, they don't know me.
Yeah.
And then, like,
Yeah.
it's a weird thing because I grew up in a large family where cousins my age, we always know each other, or just, like, it was a really strange experience that, you know, like, it's not like you're my 8th cousin. It's like you're my uncle's, like, you know, child that I don't, like, they have no idea who I am, really, and it's just, like, I don't know, it was kind of tough on me. I think they were, you know, they're bright little kids, so they kind of picked up on my name and stuff like that over Zoom. But not being able to like hold them or like play with them, it really was like, you know, it really does make a like a rift in, you know, like the family dynamic that you're used to. It's like,
Yeah, you don't get that connection.
yeah,
And my cousins have kids, and like, there was one that I literally just met a few months ago.
Really?
Yeah, she's like 2, and she's never met me. It was so weird.
I definitely look back at when I was a little kid, and like, you know, I can remember, you know, being young, and then the people that I remember are the people that I saw at least once a year, you know, or
Yeah.
in that like I like, cause you know, if you like I think everyone's had the like family experience where you're like, oh, do you remember your Uncle Billy
Yes.
or like
Yeah.
cousin
They're
Joe?
like, I remember when we
cousin
were so
Joe.
little.
You're like, you saw them once when you were 5, and then I
You
like.
expect me to remember that?
I
Yeah.
had a point. I got a little angry at one of my parents. I'm like, I'm sorry, guys. If I don't see them at least once a year, or maybe once
Oh,
every
God,
other
yeah.
year, I'm not going to
Yeah.
remember them. And I really, that's like, but knowing that, that's how like most people's minds work. It kind of like saw, well, you know, I missed out basically an entire year and a half with this, like, you know, first cousin of mine, and I'm like, so I know it's gonna like play a role, like who they're closer with, you know,
Yeah.
just when you're like, okay, I'm being hit with academics, you know,
For
isolation,
real. Yeah.
and you're like, you know, my cousin just died and I can't go to their funeral, and you're like, one more thing, and then you're like, oh, and by the way, you can't travel because, so you don't see any of your family, and just like,
Yeah.
one more thing to bring you down. That's kind of
It just kept like layering.
yeah.
Like family, school, all that. And my sophomore year, I think, was the hardest with school because I got like the academics, but I didn't get the social part, which was the part that like always meant something to me. And even though it was a little bit easier because it was online and teachers were a little more lenient, it was very frustrating to me because I still had to like do all the work, but I got none of the social aspect.
Yeah, so on that, like, how did you guys cope or find solutions for, like, these, like, everyday, daily, like, struggles in your lives? Like, how did you find those?
I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I didn't really cope, to be honest, because for me it took a while for it to set in that we were actually in a pandemic, you know? Like, I was just
Yes.
vibing in my
Yeah.
room, I'm like,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
go, I get to sleep a lot, but then, you know, it started to become a routine where I'm like, okay, why am I feeling this way? Like, why do I feel lethargic all the time? Why do I feel like I keep having to do school, and why do I feel like I'm not talking to anyone?
Yeah.
So it was like this vicious cycle. And over time, I got a therapist. I'm gonna be honest, love her to death. Not sure it worked that well. But that's
Yeah.
also a me problem, not her. She was amazing.
Yeah.
I just think it's like, we were so, I don't know about you guys, I felt like there's so much time to not do anything that I
Yeah.
was so introspective to almost a fault. And I've just really been coping by trying to be more open-minded about things, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. You know, like a lot of heavy stuff has been happening lately, which,
Yeah.
I don't know, it feels like it all just came like a storm
I know, you have like,
immediately as it started.
It keeps
Like, did you
hitting.
guys
it
feel
wasn't
that
just-
way?
Yeah, it wasn't just.
It was like
Yeah.
a pinnacle.
It wasn't just this like COVID, and then you have I'm not gonna this is not like, you know, a political YouTube channel, but like you had literally the domestic terrorist attack on our capital, and I'm like, and my grandma, you know, she's a big history buff. She's like, this hasn't happened since 1800, and I'm like, why had to happen now? You know, I'm dealing with
Yeah.
COVID. I'm like, you had to do it now, and I'm like. And everyone's getting political, and I'm just like, I actually, you know, some people got political. I really just like, I'm already low, so I was just like, it can't get any worse, like, you know. And then, you know, of course, it did get worse, but you know, it's like, I think it really opened my eyes to like where America was at. I think it really gave that like the pandemic, I don't know, era, like kind of like a source of inspiration. Oh, I gotta make sure that this does not happen when I have kids or when I'm older. Like, I gotta like, you know, do something with myself, not just, you know, be on my phone all day acting like I'm doing work on Zoom. You know, it kind of gave me, that's kind of how I cope, like kind of like I used that to like fuel me to, you know, I got active, I'm in journalism, I wrote about it, and it kind of gave me that like fuel to like during the pandemic when I'm not talking to anybody and I'm kind of at a low place.
For sure. I feel like also applying to GOP, I don't know if you guys felt this, but like GOP was almost not necessarily like advertised to us, but we're trying to create equity, right, across
Yeah.
community lines, and we're trying to fight for those social justice issues. So when I saw GOP, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is perfect, because I agree with you. I think it's like you felt stagnant for a while, and then it's like, okay, I want to start doing something. That's
Yeah.
I kind of had a similar experience too,
Yeah.
I think.
I think it really like GOP opened. I'm like, okay, what's an avenue? Like, it's nice. I do journalism, something I can actually like lasting change. And I can meet other people who think similarly and are also want to like change like our country for the better. And so I think I agree wholeheartedly with Skylar that GOP really opened that window up.
Yes, exactly. Like with those like situations going on, GOP was like a way where I could meet like different students that with different backgrounds. Like we could find solutions for something we can solve in our community. So what we're trying to like go for is like how does teen mental health and how does it like affect us all? And yeah, it's like just going into GOP and finding these like different people. Then it was just very insightful for me, and like that was kind of one of the ways how I coped with it. And yeah, it was just like a great. It still is right now, like still a great experience for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't cope very well in the beginning,
I feel that.
but definitely some of like my main like coping mechanisms were like music and like
Yeah.
I would literally
Yes.
just lay on the floor and listen to music.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
that definitely helped. And then like I write a lot of poetry. I
Yeah.
love reading. Like I would just like dive into a book. Like that was like my safe space.
Yeah.
But so things like that, and painting. But what's funny is I painted before and I watched the shift in my art. Like
I would love to
as
see that.
as my mental health got worse,
Oh.
my art changed. And so that was really interesting. But as you guys were saying, like GOP, definitely like when the applications were open, like applying really was just like I wasn't doing anything. Like
Exactly.
and I was like I need to do something.
Something.
Exactly.
Like
Anything.
I'm just sitting around and I'm like losing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so like GOP was definitely like that ray of sunshine, like an open door
For
to
sure.
Exactly.
like a new era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And also, just really quick, I think that, and you guys can disagree or agree, but something so special about Generation of Promise is that we're starting a conversation, and I think that conversations are the start to change and the start to help coping as well, because then you can realize you're not alone. Like, we've been sharing our experiences, and I've realized that I haven't been alone through all this, so personally, I just think that talking and putting your words, your stories out there really
Yeah.
help.
I think it kind of like, I don't know, I think I kind of like built kind of like reserves over myself, so I'm kind of like stronger for it. And so, yeah, it's just my 2 cents on that. And, check us out next time on our next episode. And then, yeah, thank you for listening to our YouTube channel, The Vibes.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Bye.